Okay, this is a picture of the Russian embassy in Washington, D.C., actually, technically within the Russian Federation's sovereign territory on, I think, Wisconsin Avenue up in the Northwest. I think I was along in this area in April of 2022. Let's show one more picture. That's the neon, or that's the helium atom diagram. I think it's the helium in Amarillo, Texas, which I visited also in May of 2022. And I'll get to the main point of what I want to talk about tonight, which is going to be attention that will soon, I think, more attention that will soon be placed on internet speakers, particularly individual internet speakers like me. And just the profound nature of what happened in the late 1990s when suddenly we gave ordinary people the capacity to speak publicly, especially with text essays and with arguments, not just with pictures, and the idea of having your speech indexed by a search engine for free and available to almost anyone on this planet without any gatekeepers. In other words, self-publication online and the possibility someone 12,000 miles away will find it and be influenced by it. And that turned out for me to be much more important than anybody saw coming. They were talking about the World Wide Web on television a little bit in 1993. And I went along, I started writing my book in 1994 and distributed my own printing, about 400 copies, officially on July 11th, 1997. And I would actually put the text online for free and allow people to view it for free starting in the middle of 1998. And that would become my strategy. And that's a controversial strategy. I didn't really make it into a business the way people would have expected me to. And that aspect of it, we're going to talk about later again pretty soon. Um, but um, the capacity that I have, and they gave me actually because of the unusual nature of the issue I took up, which was gays in the military and the idea of forced people into forced intimacy, whether they're living in college dorms like when I was thrown out in 1961 or in the military or today and other situations that we've been hearing about with respect to gender ideology. There's a parallel today. Um, the I was because of the unusual nature of the issue and the fact that the issue tended to generate other issues that were related to it. I did have quite a bit of visibility, even though I wasn't popular in the usual sense, and didn't really make it financially successful. From the late '90s all the way into the late 2010s until the close to the time of the pandemic. Well, there were many different iterations of what happened. Now, this capacity that I've taken advantage of for 25 years could be seriously undermined if future age verification laws that are supposed to be there, in effect now in many states regarding adult sites were to be adopted more widely for just any kind of non-traditional discussion. For example, it could be implicated by the Kids Online Safety Act or KOSA. Um, Now, there were similar laws in the past. Remember the Communications Decency Act of 1996, and the main part of it was struck down. But the important part, the Section 230, which limits downstream liability for platforms and social media platforms, but even for web hosts and and email providers, anybody like that, even if they do moderation um, on their own, which that's kind of made the internet possible because it protected people who give us these platforms from downstream liability. And that's been also up for grabs for the last few years, but whether Section 230 will be around. In fact, it could expire at the end of 2025. That's one law. But the provisions in the Communications Decency Act and then the act that followed in 1998, the Child Online Protection Act, COPA, which should not be confused with COPA, the Child Online Privacy Protection Act, which YouTube talked a lot about at the end of 2019, just before we had the pandemic. It was based on what you call the harmful to minors content, and it recognized the idea that parents do have a responsibility for controlling what their children see. But this was back in the mid 2000s. The COPA law got before the Supreme Court twice and got sent back for various reasons. And finally, there was a trial in Philadelphia in 2007. I actually went to one day of it. And I could have put that picture into of that building. But it was struck down, and I would think that that would be useful against these state laws that are right now going in effect that require adult, age verification for viewing of sites that are, states have defined them, that are 25 or 33% explicit sexual content. Now, the danger is that as time goes by, and I mentioned my books again. I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned the first book was written before I actually put it online. That was this one, but the idea that you would have to somebody would have to verify their age to view even a discussion of anything, of any non-traditional sexual orientation or identity. The idea, for example, that if something isn't being taught in school yet, that no one else can discuss it online unless they put an age verification screen in front of it. I'm concerned that we may see a law like that soon. And one of the reasons I'm concerned is another problem, and Elon Musk even talked about it today, that around the rest of the world, a lot of people are concerned about declining birth rates. And they think that internet content from the West, even behind VPNs, right, to hide where you are, which allow youth to see them, are discouraging particularly young men, but also young women from being interested in having families. And both Russia and now Hungary and have laws against putting anything online and where a child could see it that even discusses this. That's been in effect in Hungary since 2021. And what's going on right now? Trump is going to be talking maybe to Putin pretty soon about Ukraine. He may talk to some of these other people like Orban, and he may hear a lot about this kind of idea. That's something I'm concerned about. And even today, Elon Musk was talking about the birth rate again, and the fact that he has, I think, 12 kids or something, but that people have lost interest in having children. And there are a lot of other reasons, the economy, and then people, just some of us, not having the disposition to even want to have heterosexual sex or heterosexual relations, a minority of us, which are sort of immutable. But this could become a serious problem, and it could become a serious problem very suddenly. Um, Now, in fact, Pornhub, regarding these adult sites, Pornhub blocks all users from, I think it's about 22 states now that say they require age verification for adult sites. And Pornhub, because it says no age verification can work, it wants device level verification. Um, However, the state of Texas is challenged, which is um, since the Texas law has been challenged and it's gone up to the Supreme Court, and recently Texas was defending its law in the Supreme Court. Texas claimed that there is an age verification method that Las Vegas uses for people using its betting systems that is secure enough that websites can use it. I don't know the details of how that would work. I haven't actually gotten around to looking at it yet. But we might have to accept the idea that websites routinely, if even ordinary minors can see them at all, will have to require age sign on, and somehow it's going to have to be secure, despite all of the denial of it, even by Electronic Frontier Foundation, which has published a lot of essays, against the idea of requiring it. And remember, the impossibility of age verification was one of the reasons why the Child Online Protection Act was struck down in 2007. But it's still going to be around, and we may have to figure out with our technology now if there's a way we can do this. I mean, it's not being discussed right now in the news media, but it could happen anytime, very suddenly. Perhaps if the subject comes up overseas, that Western users are corrupting youth in other countries or something. We didn't used to have to worry about that, but all of a sudden, I don't know, with Trump talking to Putin and talking to Orban and so forth, I wonder how this could go. Um, um, Now, one other thing that struck me about this is that, um, children and minors have been learning about gay issues since the 1970s and the 1980s, just from mainstream media and from all the publicity about HIV and AIDS in the 1980s, which we slowly got out from under largely, and then from other issues like Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and gays in the military, which came up under Bill Clinton in the 1990s and didn't get resolved until 2011. And we're not sure what is going to happen to that now with Peter Hegseth. It's not the same as the transgender issue. That's the original gays in the military issue. We don't know where that might go. But also then the discussion of gay marriage in the media, and of course, many pride festivals, but the pride festivals and so forth have become a lot more explicit and a lot more actually geared to get the attention of minors since the pandemic was over. And I'm not going to get into a detailed discussion of gender ideology right here, but what I would say is that since generally school kids aren't taught about biology, the science of it, and the science of how sex works with animals and plants and so forth, until maybe ninth grade, typically until high school, they really aren't taught very accurately what happens when they're in second and third grade. But they may hear about it at home. So I think academia for a long time in the teaching profession had been trying to come up with another way to educate kids to see gender differently. And that's where the idea of gender identity came up. And you couldn't talk about sex itself in front of young minors, but you could talk about gender as a social construct. And you could talk about a concept like gender identity. And then we got the pronouns, but then it started getting exploited. And the issue of gender affirming care and women's sports and all these other issues started coming up and overwhelming the discussion. Really, when I was blogging, I wasn't very aware of how much of this was going on or how controversial it had gotten until after the pandemic, until maybe 2021. I didn't pay very much attention to it at all for the many years I was using Blogger and my WordPress blogs. So for the heart, I always thought of transgender as someone who had transitioned in adulthood and fully and was recognized as such, and it was very simple. But I didn't realize that it was a lot more complicated than this, that it actually was mattering until after the pandemic. But we'll talk about that in another video soon. I think the whole idea is useful in helping minors and people and adults too, who have trouble competing with others with respect to their birth sex, or even if there are no obvious physiological problems or genetic or chromosomal or any other problem, just simply they just don't do as well or just aren't as attractive. And so this ideology is attractive to them. That's another problem. And the attitude of people towards others who are not as competitive individually in our society, the hyper individualism that we have, that's still another problem that I'll get back to that as how it affects me personally soon. But I just wanted to talk about that and warn you that the issue of age verification of websites is likely to come up very soon and likely to be very sudden, and we're going to have to be prepared to discuss it. So just letting you know, and I'll keep tabs on it. I'm going to talk about my own personal stake in this and history with it in some detail and a few more videos coming up. But I do thank you for listening tonight.